The NBA industry is just as hard to navigate as the sport itself, and that's precisely what we'll be discussing today in terms of James Harden and Daryl Morey. If you haven't heard yet, James Harden has had to take a significant pay cut this season, and Daryl Morey is apparently pleased with the act. Here's all you need to know about it. First up, let's talk about James Harden. First entering the world of the NBA way back in 2009, we bet James Harden did not expect to make the decision he just did. If you're somehow unaware, Harden just declined his personal player option of making $47.3 million next season, all just to sign a new contract with a player option in year 2, mind you, that's worth $68.6 million. Apparently this will see him take a cut of $14 million next year. And yeah, it is a big deal, because Harden became the first star player to take a pay cut that extensive in the modern history of the league. That's huge. Comparatively, we have had players like Dirk Nowitzki who have taken a team-friendly deal at the age of 39, and Kevin Durant, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh lost out on a couple of $1 million in their prime of their careers. But nothing holds a candle to what Harden gave up in terms of monetary compensation for his time in the NBA. Now let's talk about why Harden took that pay cut at all. One would wonder why someone that established would willfully take that huge of a pay cut moving forward at all. What justifies that decision? Well, Harden made the conscious decision to take the pay cut to help his team, the Philadelphia 76ers, build a championship contender around himself and co-star Joel Embiid. He apparently even reportedly told the Sixers president of basketball operations, Daryl Morey, to improve the roster and even decide who they needed to sign, then give him whatever is left over. His latest contract decision has been simultaneously described as both unselfish and wise. The consequences of him making the difficult yet selfless decision have been all positive and praiseworthy. That huge pay cut helped the Sixers sign PJ Tucker, a veteran forward, to a 3-year contract worth $33 million. This was a smart move since it managed to part him from competitors Miami Heat, who'd beaten the Sixers in the 2022 playoffs. Concerning this, Embiid mentioned Tucker to be someone who plays with the kind of toughness and physicality that the Sixers lacked, and that since he'd been here, he'd been lying if he said that the Sixers have had those kinds of players, that they've never had a PJ Tucker. How did the contract help the team, you ask? Well, with that massive pay cut, the Sixers also managed to sign Daniel House Jr. to a 2-year contract worth $8.4 million. And that's not all either. They also signed Trevelin Queen, aka the 2021 and 22 G League MVP. The Sixers managed to add depth, athleticism, and shooting to a team with so much promise already. Like, they would have very easily made it to the NBA Finals last year if Embiid hadn't, unfortunately, suffered an orbital fracture and torn ligament in his thumb during the playoffs. And all of that was only possible, that is, the adding of players and the chance to improve their title chances, had Harden not willfully given in to that pay cut. James Harden doesn't need to prove himself as a good player in the NBA. We mean to say he is a former MVP, a 10-time All-Star, and a 3-time scoring champion who has every individual accolade possible. Yet he has never won an NBA championship. Call it fortune or fate, but that's just never happened for him. So perhaps the fact that he would go to such extents to increase his, and inadvertently his team's, shot at the NBA championship speaks only to his dedication and work ethic. Daryl Morey, for one, is extremely proud of James Harden's decision. As mentioned before, Daryl Morey and James Harden share more than just the NBA, they also share a team. On a recent episode of The Takeoff with John Clark, Daryl Morey, aka the Sixers president of basketball operations, as we mentioned before, claimed that James Harden's decision to take a pay cut was one of the most significant contributions from a star player during a contract season of all time. He also said that because of Harden's decision, they managed to get Montrezl Harrell, and they definitely couldn't have done that without him taking less money and constantly talking to Trez. Now we all knew that Harden's popularity in the NBA was always going to play a crucial part in Philly's off-season moves, plus the fact that he's played with Tucker, Harrell, and House in the past definitely assisted in giving the 76ers an edge in negotiations. And eventually, it came down to the fact that the Sixers' ability to make key signings this year came down to the question of whether they were tied up with huge salary demands from their star player or not. And fortunately enough, his big act of selflessness allowed Morey and the front office to build around the key core of Harden, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, and Tyrese Maxey a killer lineup. Except not everyone feels that way about Harden's decision. For all that we've talked about concerning Harden's big act of selflessness, turns out not everyone sees it that way. You'd assume turning down millions of dollars for the benefit of your team would make people kinder to you, but welcome to the internet, we guess. Especially from fans and pundits outside of Philadelphia, his decision has been met with lots of criticism and cynicism. For one, ESPN's Max Kellerman made his and a lot of people's sentiments clear when he said that the reason for his personal suspicion was because Harden's choice does two things at one. It does obviously help them sign all these new fancy players and everything, like House and PJ Tucker, but in reality, the decision is not entirely selfless because it does get him an extra, guaranteed $27 million and another year on his deal with the team. And perhaps, according to Kellerman, Harden doesn't believe he'd be worth that in the years going forward. In his words, maybe what he's feeling now now is, I don't know if I'm going to get that in 2 years. Other than that, you have people who've speculated that James Harden will make all this money back in a nefarious, perhaps mischievous way, maybe even off the books, yes, or maybe in the form of secretly promised long-term extension next offseason. Now, of course, that's all speculation. After all, this is the NBA, and nothing is guaranteed. For example, a single injury at 32 can impact all of Harden's future earnings massively. And yeah, maybe this was his final opportunity to cash in, especially because his skills are objectively getting worse by the season. Usually, a player like that would opt into their $47 million player option next season, or take the maximum amount as a free agent on the open market, and the Sixers would have to match that because they have very little leverage in the matter and could not have afforded to watch him walk away. But Harden took a discount, and that's all we know. Kellerman also added that many people will often frame things as if they're not self-interested, and they're almost always self-interested, and that's why he's so cynical of the act. And in the same breath, he acknowledged that Harden turned down long-term extensions from both his previous teams, the Houston Rockets and Brooklyn Nets, all because he didn't like the direction the franchises were headed. So yes, more likely than not, we can acknowledge that Harden's decision was in some part motivated by self-interest, but we can also acknowledge that interest may not necessarily be monetary gain. Finally, is self-interest even the problem? And what jars many of Harden's supporters is that it's usually these same people criticizing Harden for his apparent selflessness and having an ulterior motive, who also then go and criticize players such as Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal for taking the most money possible to stay with their franchises. To them, it doesn't make sense to question these motives, especially when the results seem to matter more than the reasons on occasions such as these. It's apparently the same people laughing at Chris Paul and Charles Barkley for never winning a title, who then criticize Harden for making a calculated move in his career, that is, taking this pay cut, to get himself closer to winning the NBA championship. To these people, James Harden seems to be at a point in his career where he can and is very willing to make small monetary sacrifices for the greater good of the team and his first NBA championship. He's certainly made more than enough money to be able to make his financial decision. Why not enjoy it and see where it leads? And that's all for this video. What do you think of Daryl Morey's assessment of Harden's decision? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed watching the video, be sure to leave a like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications by pressing the bell icon to get notified every time we post a new video. And we will see you next time. Thank you for watching.